Hey, thanks for stopping by the channel. Thanks for making sure you're subscribed and that you're checking out the bell icon down there somewhere so that you're getting notifications. And let me know what you think. This video, I'm going to be talking about the difference between referring to public servants or officials, whether they be elected or appointed, and why I use the terminology servant over official, even though we refer to things such as office of or department of. So here's why. It's going to be the shortest video I've ever made because they're not officials. They're servants. End of video. Okay, I'm kidding. There's a lot more to it than that. So I have been saying for quite some time and will continue to say and will insist that you do the same thing. They are not officials, even though they might be in an office. You have the office of the sheriff, you have the office of the mayor, you have the office of the county administrator, you have the office of the county, your county board office, the office of a legislator, office of a senator, the office of the governor, the office of this attorney general, or the office of the president, and so on and so forth. But I adamantly reject the reference to somebody being an official or being an officer. Now, those terms are real. They have some real bearing, and there are people, there are officials, right? But, even when we refer to police officers, we don't just refer to them as cops. We don't refer to them as pigs. There are police officers, right? But why do I insist on referring to people as servants, public servants, be they elected or appointed? Here's why. Because they've forgotten who they are. It's just fundamentally and absolutely true. Most of the time, the position of holding an office, for some reason, in the mindset of the current American culture, the current American sociological experiment, a person gets into an appointed office or an elected office, and they have forgotten that they are servants. And it's a fundamentally dangerous perspective. And we have to begin to use language that reminds them of who they are. It's an unpopular position. I understand. I mean, nobody wants to be the person who works at the local park and somebody walks up to them and says, "Hey, you, Mr. Public Servant, come clean up my picnic area because I am your employer and I demand that you serve me." That's not the way we should talk to people. But at the same time, public servants should not be in a position where they are holding that position, there again, be they elected or appointed, and they're lording it over the people who have elected them, or the people who have elected the people who have appointed them. So if you look to most cities, mayors obviously are elected. City council is elected. But there are positions within a city, within a jurisdiction of a city, that are appointed. Most often, the position that we think of would be the chief of police. The chief of police is a position of a department, police department, right? The chief is appointed by the mayor. Yet the chief is still a public servant. He doesn't have all authority. He's not officially your superior if you are a member of the community. He is a servant. And everyone who works under the umbrella of his office, of his department, is also a public servant. And they serve at the discretion of the mayor, and they serve at the discretion of the city council. And sometimes it's a combination of both, or only under the umbrella of one or the other. But they are still public servants because they're appointed to those positions by people who are elected to those positions. And what happens all too often is that once people attain these positions, it goes straight to their head. And they begin to think that they are somehow in a different class. There is a particular political commentator and social commentator that I enjoy listening to here in the state of Minnesota, and he says that they often live on a parallel track to the rest of society. That once they get into these positions, they somehow cease to exist as a normal part of normative culture. And in that world that they exist in, and now I'm building on this thought, this isn't from him. That world that they exist in somehow grants them more power, grants them more authority, if you will. That somehow now their decisions are final, their decisions are absolute, and their decisions are right, just simply for the fact that they are the person making them. And one of the things that I have been thinking about in this, in insisting that people refer to those people as servants over the use of the word official, is especially directed towards those who are in elected positions, elected servants. So why do I say that? People who are running for an office, who are running for a particular political position, asking for people to vote for them and put them into that position, it and they do it in a way that kind of resembles being interviewed for a job, right? I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Green Party, Marxist Party, or the DFL, whatever it might be, you spend time campaigning. And what is a campaign? A campaign is nothing more than a job interview, right? Sometimes that job interview is a couple of months long. Sometimes that job interview is several years long. I mean, we've already got people that are talking about launching their campaign for the next presidential election in 2024. We have people that are here in the state of Minnesota that are talking about running for governor in 2022. And that election is just a little over a year away. And they're already talking about running for governor. Running for governor. And what they should be saying is, I'm interviewing with the people. I'm interviewing with we the people for this job as a servant. That's what they should be saying, because it is an interview process. And so they make all these promises day in and day out. I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you that. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to promise you that I will serve you. I'm going to do everything that I've promised. I'm going to do everything that you ask of me, because I want you to vote for me on election day so that I can take this job and be the best public servant that I can be. And then election day rolls around and they get into office and they say, hey, I'm in office. I hold this position. Now I have to hold on to it. And I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that I keep that power in my hands, all for your good. And overnight, in a lot of situations, those people go from being applicants for a job to applicants for a position of despotism, to be your tyrant, to be untouchable, to operate on that separate track where they live a life that's completely devoid of any reality, wherein they can relate to their constituency. So let's look at it this way, okay? So let's say you happen to own a local grocery store, small town, Rocks and Cows, Minnesota, or maybe urban Marxisota, right? But you own a local grocery store, and you're hiring for the position of cashier and bagger and stocker. You're hiring for those positions, and you happen to be one of those businesses that likes to employ high school students. So that 15, 16-year-old student comes in, they fill out an application, and you say, hey, great, thanks for filling that out. Why don't you come back in on Wednesday of next week, and we'll do an interview. And they're like, awesome. And they come into the interview, and you say, all right, you've got a great application. You shared with me your GPA. You're clearly a hard worker. You take part in a lot of different sporting events. You've got a track record, if you will, that says that you could be a very good employee here, but please tell me why I should hire you. And in that interview process for that job as a cashier or a bagger or a stocker, They say, "Hey, here's the deal. I'm gonna come in here, you're gonna hire me for whatever the prevailing wage at for this kind of job is for this area, and I am going to clean the bathrooms without it being asked. I'm going to stock the shelves when I see that they're empty. I'm going to make sure that the aisles are swept. I'm gonna make sure that the aisles are clean. I'm gonna make sure that that spills are cleaned up. I'm going to make sure that every customer is guided to any item that they're looking for without having to be told that it's my responsibility to do so. I am going to treat you with respect. I'm going to treat you as if you are what you are, which is my employer, and I will do everything that you ask of me without question, without fail." And you're like, "Wow, man, this kid was raised right. This kid has a solid head on their shoulders. Man, their parents did a good job." Tell you what, you come in tomorrow and you can start tomorrow. I'm very, very impressed with what you said there. That I You could go far with a company like this if you keep that mentality. And they're like, "Man, you know what? Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity." And the next day, they show up for the job at 8 o'clock. They walk in and they look at you and they're like, "Okay, I'm here and I just want to let you know I'm in charge now. And not only am I in charge, you work for me. And I'm going to tell you that at the end of this week, I'm going to expect that you give me a $5 an hour raise. I'm going to take at least an hour and a half worth of breaks in an 8-hour shift. Not only am I going to take an hour and a half worth of breaks, I don't want you to contact me while I'm on break. I don't want you to bother me while I'm on break. I don't want you to ask me what I'm doing while I'm on break. And I certainly do not want you following me around and expecting that I'm stocking the shelves, taking out groceries, cleaning the bathroom, taking out trash, helping customers. I'm in charge now." That is about 98% of the people who run for office in the state of Minnesota and around the rest of the country. And quite frankly, that's about 98% of the people who are appointed into positions of authority by people who are elected into positions of authority. They tell you everything that you want to hear and they promise to be your servant until they get into positions of power. And once they get a taste of that power, they don't want to give it up. And they're going to make damn sure that you know that you are the plebe, that you are the servant, and that you exist to pay the taxes that they tell you to pay, that you exist to do everything that they say to do, that they can pass whatever they want and make it a law, or they can issue an edict from on high and call it an executive order that bears the weight of law. You are obligated to obey them because they are the master and you are the servant. And don't you know that everything they're doing is for your good and you will be obedient? I'm telling you right now that if any teenage kid in high school or high school age walked into the grocery store where he was told the day before to come in and he would have a job and he could go far, anybody who did that to the owner of the grocery store, the general manager of the grocery store would be out on their ear the very minute they tried to pull that crap. But here in the United States, in this fine republic, in the democracy that we once called Minnesota, but is now the dictatorship of Marxisota, people get into elected positions, and for the most part, they have forgotten themselves. And they walked in on their first day on the job and said, "I'm in charge, listen to me." And they should be chucked out on their ears. And that describes the vast majority of people in public office, public servants, because almost all of them act that way until election time comes around again and they start campaigning and making all sorts of promises so that you'll keep them in office, so that they can keep their power and they can keep you subservient to them. They've forgotten they're the servants. Every one of them. Every one of them, save for a few. The majority of people in positions of public service consider themselves to be the superior to the people who put them in those positions. The mayor thinks they're in charge of you. The governor thinks he's in charge of you. The chief of police thinks he's in charge of you. The sheriff thinks he's in charge of you. The dog catcher thinks he's in charge of you. The park board thinks they're in charge of you. The street department thinks they're in charge of you. I can think of a particular situation. I know of an individual who made some statements about the street department of the municipality that they lived in and said they're doing a horrible job of taking care of the streets during winter in the state of Minnesota. And their response was, well, I guess if you want your taxes to go up, we can start cleaning them better during snowstorms. Did you hear that? Literally, that was said. That was said. If you want your streets cleaned better, then you need to pay more taxes. That's an ultimatum. That's an ultimatum. They treat you like you exist to pay them to do the job that they should be doing as public servants. And that does not excuse the guy who walks into Quick Trip and sees the cop boat and they're getting a cup of coffee and he asks a question and the cop says, I don't know. And their response is, you work for me. Like, don't treat people like that. But vast majority of people in public service need to be reminded that they are the servant and not the master. And especially people who get voted into the positions they're in. They need to be reminded that they are the servant and not the master. They need to be told you are not that 15-year-old kid who gets that job in the grocery store and then walks in the next day and declares yourself the high muckety-muck owner of the business. Across the board, with a few exceptions, the vast majority of people who are put into office by the electorate, by their constituent, go on one day from being the person begging for a job to then being the person demanding that everybody else serve them and keep them where they are. It has to stop. Every single person who is elected or appointed by someone who is elected needs to remember that they serve at our will, they serve at our discretion, and that they are not in charge of anything. That they answer to we the people, and that we the people have the power and the wherewithal to remove them from office when they have forgotten that they are the servants and we are the masters. If you don't like that language, that tells me that you are way too cocky and that you are way out of touch. You are servants. We are the masters. We the people are the masters of your political fate. And you should tremble at the idea that you would upset one of us, or 4 of us, or 100 of us, because we could come and remove you from your job that we put you in, that we hired you to do, because we are the boss. And what we say goes, not what you say. That should be considered when we vote for people. If there's any inkling that these people are out of touch, they should be removed and replaced immediately. Otherwise, we are condoning tyranny and laziness. Until next time, sic temper tyrannis.